The theater was loud just moments ago, filled with chatter, flashing lights, and the usual excitement of a talent show stage. But the second the young Filipino boy stepped forward, something shifted. He wasn't dressed like a superstar. No glitter, no expensive outfit, no dramatic entrance. Just a simple boy, holding an old guitar like it was the most precious thing he owned. His eyes carried a weight far heavier than his age. The judges glanced at him with polite curiosity, expecting another sweet performance, maybe something traditional, maybe something safe. But the audience could feel it. This boy wasn't here to entertain. He was here to tell a story without words. When asked why he chose to audition, he spoke softly, almost trembling, explaining how music was the only escape from poverty, from hardship, from nights where hope felt impossible. The room grew quiet. Even Simon Cowell leaned forward. And then came the shock. The boy announced his song choice, Hotel California. A legendary classic. A song even professionals fear. People exchanged doubtful looks. How could a child possibly sing something so complex? But the boy didn't hesitate. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began. The first guitar strum echoed through the hall like a heartbeat. It wasn't perfect in a polished way, but it was raw, real, alive. His fingers moved carefully over the strings, as if every chord carried years of struggle. Then he sang the opening line, and instantly the atmosphere transformed. His voice was not the voice of a child. It held something deeper, pain, longing, experience beyond his years. The audience froze. People stopped breathing. The judge's expressions changed from curiosity to disbelief. There was a haunting softness in his tone, like someone singing from a place of memory rather than performance. It wasn't about hitting notes. It was about emotion. Each lyric sounded like it meant something personal, as if Hotel California was no longer just a rock song, but a confession. The boy's voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from truth. The crowd wasn't just listening anymore, they were feeling. Some audience members began wiping tears before the chorus even arrived. This wasn't a cover. This was a soul speaking through music. As he reached the chorus, something unbelievable happened. The boy's voice grew stronger, filling the room with a kind of aching power. It was as if every hardship he had ever faced poured into the melody. The lyrics, about being trapped in a place you can't leave, suddenly sounded like the story of his life. People realized this wasn't just a child singing an old American classic. This was a young boy from the Philippines, standing under bright lights, carrying the weight of a world that had not been kind to him, yet still daring to dream. His guitar playing became more confident, his voice rising like a prayer. The judges were stunned into silence. Simon's face, usually guarded, softened completely. One judge whispered, "This is unreal." The boy's eyes remained closed, as though he was singing only to survive. In that moment, the stage wasn't a competition stage anymore. It was his only chance, his only voice, his only way to tell the world, "I'm here. I matter. Please hear me." Halfway through the song, the audience was already emotionally broken. People weren't cheering, they were crying. A grown man in the front row covered his face. A woman held her chest like the song was physically hurting her. The boy's voice carried an innocence mixed with sorrow that was impossible to ignore. Even the judges, trained to critique talent, looked more like humans than celebrities in that moment. Simon Cowell, known for his brutal honesty, sat completely still, his eyes locked on the boy, as if trying to understand how such a small person could hold such enormous emotion. When the boy reached the iconic guitar break, he didn't just play it. He lived it. The notes sounded like footsteps through memories, through struggles, through dreams that almost died. And then, as he sang the final chorus, his voice trembled again. It was heartbreak in musical form. It was the sound of someone fighting not to give up. The room was no longer watching a contestant. They were witnessing something rare, pure, unfiltered humanity. As the song neared its end, the boy's voice softened, almost like a whisper. The last lyrics floated into the air like smoke, fragile and haunting. He opened his eyes for the first time and looked out at the audience, and in them was a quiet plea. Did you feel it too? His fingers strummed the final chord, and the sound faded slowly into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody clapped. Nobody even breathed. It was the kind of silence that only happens when something has touched people too deeply for noise. The boy stood there, small under the massive stage lights, holding his guitar like a lifeline. His shoulders rose and fell as he tried to steady himself. Then, suddenly, the entire theater erupted. A standing ovation, so loud it felt like the walls would shake. People screamed. People cried harder. The judges stood instantly. One of them shouted, "That was the most emotional performance I've ever heard." Simon Cowell didn't speak right away. He looked genuinely shaken, like the performance had reached somewhere deep inside him. When Simon finally leaned into the microphone, his voice was quieter than usual. "Young man," he said, "that was not just singing. That was something unforgettable." The boy's eyes filled with tears. Simon continued, "You didn't just perform a song. You made the world feel something real." The other judges praised him, calling it one of the most powerful auditions of the season. But the boy barely smiled, because for him, this wasn't about fame. It was about hope, about proving that even a poor child from Cebu, with nothing but an old guitar and a broken heart, could stand on the biggest stage in the world and stop time. That night, the internet would explode. Millions would watch and cry. People across the globe would call him an angel, a miracle, a voice of the unheard. And while the song Hotel California has been sung thousands of times, everyone knew the truth after this performance. They had never heard it like this before. Not from a superstar, not from a legend, but from a Filipino boy whose pain turned into music, and whose music turned into history.